Sind wir jetzt, dass wir diese Veranstaltung hier haben, die Freunde mit uns durchführen und wo wir die Möglichkeit haben, einen Teil des Materials, das vielleicht auch in der Ausstellung hätte landen können, nochmal in die Tiefe genauer anzuschauen. Und es geht eben heute um den Film von Lene Berg, da ist sie gerade gesehen, Stalin bei Picasso, Portrait of a Woman with Moustache von 2008, der sich mit einer Zeichnung von Picasso und dem Gebrauch dieser Zeichnung in den französischen Medien beschäftigt. Und ich habe sehr viel gelernt aus diesem Film, den ich sehen konnte in einer Ausstellung im Haus der Kulturen der Welt. Und wir hatten ganz früh auch Kontakt mit der Ausstellung, überlegt, ob es eine Möglichkeit gibt, diese Kontroverse um diese Zeichnung irgendwie in die Ausstellung zu integrieren. Es gibt auch ein Buch, das zu diesem Film entstanden ist, und im Endeffekt musste ich leider diesen Film rauslassen, weil ich einfach oder auch dieses ganze Material, weil wir so viel anderes haben, und es hat quasi nur noch die Zeichnung von Picasso in der Fassung in Lettres, françaises in die Ausstellung geschafft. Aber umso froher bin ich, dass wir heute Abend hier mit Lene Berg zusammen diesen Film angucken können. Lene Berg ist eine norwegische Filmemacherin und Künstlerin. Sie lebt aber heute vor allem in Berlin und auch in den USA. Und sie geht eben oft von dokumentarischem Material aus, das sie dann mit künstlerischen Mitteln bearbeitet und künstlerisch aufnimmt, und oft geht es, oder eigentlich immer geht es um politische Themen in ihren Filmen. Und auch das ist schon eben so nah an der Art, wie diese Ausstellung mit dem Material umgeht. Deswegen freue ich mich ganz besonders. Sie arbeitet, ich habe das mit dem Buch schon erwähnt, aber auch mit anderen Medien, in Collagen, Fotografien und vor allem auch im öffentlichen Raum. Auch das werden wir heute besprechen, weil auch zu diesem Stalin bei Picasso-Film ein öffentliches Projekt gehört. Ich will nicht zu viel vorwegnehmen, dazu kommen wir noch. Lene Berg hat seit 1997 4 Langfilme und mehrere Kurzfilme produziert. Also dieser Stalin-Film ist, oder Stalin bei Picasso-Film ist kein wirklicher Stalin-Film, hat 30 Minuten, das zählt eben zu den Kurzfilmen. Und ihr letzter Feature-Film von den Langfilmen ist False Belief von 2019, und der lief unter anderem auf der Berlinale in Berlin und war für einige Preise nominiert, und darin setzt sie sich mit dem Rassismus und dem strukturellen Rassismus in der USA auseinander, wo sie eben auch lebt. Ich freue mich sehr, dass Lilian Haberer auch bei uns ist, als Professorin für Kunstwissenschaft mit erweitertem Materialbegriff an der Kunsthochschule für Medien, werden Sie einige hier kennen. Ich freue mich, dass sie dieses Gespräch im Anschluss an den Film mit Lene Berg führen wird. Sie hat sich mit der Verbindung von Politik und Fiktion auseinandergesetzt und interessiert sich für die Frage, wie mit den Mitteln der Collage und Montage dann im Film Kontexte erschlossen werden können. Und das ist eben genau die Verbindung zu dem Film von Lene Berg. Ich werde jetzt gar nicht viel weiter sprechen, sondern wir gucken diesen Film gemeinsam an. Dann wird es ein kurzes Gespräch geben zwischen Lene Berg und Lilian Haberer, und ungefähr 15-20 Minuten haben wir gesagt. Und dann bekommen Sie auch noch die Gelegenheit, Fragen zu stellen. Und jetzt würde ich sagen, Film ab.
Yeah, welcome also from my side, from our side. Thank you very much for this very multi-layered film, giving the background. I'm quite interested in, maybe you were retelling the story and this controversial reactions by the party, but you were before also putting it all in the context of the Cold War, what the Western and the Eastern people said. But what is quite interesting is also that your film has a long reception history too. So for the ones who don't know it, in 2007 and 2008 you showed it, and as Julia said before, your work is not only the film, but it has 3 parts. It has a book, and it also has a banner, or 3 banners. So maybe you would like to talk about the background. I also found, sorry that it's very long, I found a very nice citation by you, but where you said that it's a story evolving around the opposite icons from the 20th century, and also what you say on another level, it's about art and artistic freedom. And yeah, I'm quite curious what you explain us about.
The 2 parts, one of my starting points to do it was obviously the drawing itself, which I thought was a surprise coming from Picasso. Just as a drawing, I thought it was a very untypical drawing, and also I thought I could see that someone was put in a very difficult spot and had solved it in a very kind of, I don't know how to put it, but yeah, you felt it was kind of awkward, the whole drawing. But then I didn't know about the controversy. I read about the controversy later, and I was totally surprised to hear that people actually thought this was the feelings just this little drawing had created. But then I thought that a lot of the arguments used against Picasso's drawing in '53 resemble the arguments that I have met in TV stations and film funding in terms of whatever you want to do that's not like people don't understand it, or who are you to say that this is art, or who are you to do it, yeah. Anyway, that was one of the backgrounds for doing it. Then, when I did the film, I didn't have really, let's say, I didn't know where to show it. So I kind of invented this. This is a very central square in Oslo. It's called Youngstorget. It's where the Labour Party has their headquarters. It's where all the demonstrations when I was a kid started there. And then this building used to be called the People's Theatre. It is not called, it's actually gone back to be called that now, but that's, and then I worked with a young curator called Künstlerin Lene Berg, and we suggested this to show the film in the top floor of this building, the People's Theatre, and then having this banner on the facade, or these 3 banners on the facade for 1 day. Yes, for 1 day. And they said yes. I must admit, I was a little bit surprised that they, yeah, great, just do it. And we funded the whole project. It was quite, it was an endeavor to print this building. I don't remember how big it is, but it's kind of huge. And then 3 weeks before it was going to happen, it was like, no, you can't do it. You can't do it, and you can't do it. And then that was like, yeah. So there are kind of lots of aspects of how that happened, and I tried to kind of get in touch with the board and get in touch with whatever happened. And it turned out that it was a very central Labour Party politician who had just said this is not going to happen, even though he was not actually in the board, but he could say this is not going to happen. And then there was a kind of a big discussion. We showed the film and the book and all of that, but the banner didn't happen. But since it was on the front page of some newspapers, a lot of people saw this. They even saw it on the facade, which is also very interesting in terms of... Yeah, so this is just a totally, I didn't even try to make it look, this was just a sketch I sent to the board to get the, or to fund it. So this image here was made for that. But then since they printed it, it's sort of stuck with a lot of people. So very many people have also the feeling that they saw it. I've also been attacked at the party once by a Labour politician who thought he saw it and who felt that I had dishonored the party by this project. Yeah, and then later that year I was invited to do the project to show the film and the book, but and also in relation to another project I've made about the CIA and the Cold War, called The Man in the Background. And then they wanted the banner on the facade of Cooper Union, which is, for those who know in New York, it's on Bowery. It's a very, I don't know, you can see it from afar. The idea was that the banner was going to be there for, I think, 4 or 5 weeks, and the exhibition was going to be inside of Cooper Union. And I told them about the controversy in Oslo, And they said, you know, don't worry, in New York no one cares. No one cares, we're so cool. It was there for 3 days, and I came to meet the Norwegian cultural minister who wanted to see the exhibition, and I came there and he stood there with his whole entourage, and they were looking at the newspaper with the building, because they had been there the day before and sort of saw this picture, but the banner wasn't there anymore, it was gone. So they were just standing there like, wasn't this the building? Isn't this Cooper Union? What happened? And I still don't know exactly what happened, because no one told me why they took down the banner before it was tattooed, or just after 3 days. There were several, I knew that there had been reactions to it, and one of them came from a Ukrainian group in East Village, because Cooper Union is in East Village. And they felt that by having an image of Stalin on Cooper Union, it was in honor of Stalin, and Stalin, they of course had a history where Stalin was not to be honored, which I did not mean him to be honored, but that was kind of one part of it. Then the other explanation was that the banner was 1 foot too wide. This is a Department of Building in New York. And then I think there was a third explanation, which I now forgot. Anyway, the banner was gone. And I closed the exhibition, and then there was a lot of back and forth, and quite a lot of discussion around both the project and the Cooper Union's decision. But Cooper Union never made a public statement on why it was taken down. That was the short. So actually, a student shot these images of when it was deinstalled, but I didn't know it was deinstalled. And that was also made an impression on me. She contacted me and told me she had the photographs and gave them to me, but she did not want to be credited, which I thought was also, for me, at that point I was very surprised that was kind of, that she felt threatened, or she felt she was scared to say that she had shot them.
In a way, it's a bit like there was an exhibition called History Repeats Itself, and I had the feeling, or we were talking about before, that in a way this reaction by the people were a bit similar to Aragon, to the reaction of the Communist Party, because as you told me, the people didn't, they didn't talk with you, they offended you directly, and they directly said, okay, we don't want to talk about it anymore, and so we tear it down, or we don't put it even up, and and there's no communication with you. So I was quite surprised to hear that you didn't get any communication also with the curators afterwards. From the
I think that is. I think it's an interesting aspect. But afterwards, I also think that. Maybe, so one of the things that I've been interested in, and the reason I wanted to make the banner, is that how public space is used in the former West, let's say, which is more for advertisement and commercial messages, that we are kind of almost blind to the fact that there are messages, and they're also very close to propaganda. Let's say it's not exactly the same as propaganda used to be in the East or in the Soviet Union, but it is related, and somehow I think I hit it more, almost more precisely than I knew, because I was more interested in actually when I did the project and the film, I was very interested in the fact that this part of Picasso, Pablo Picasso, was, I had no idea. I maybe had heard that he was a communist, but I never saw the drawing and I never heard anything about these discussions. I thought that was interesting in terms of the whole art history, the canon, the male genius, the white, whatever. So I thought that was what interested me. But then when this banner discussion came up, I also thought that, okay, this is the other part that I'm very interested in. How do we read images? How let's say, sophisticated are we, or how good are we at treating ambivalence and messages that are not clear? So a commercial message is often very clear. You know that you're going to buy something, or this is a good thing for you, or someone is selling it. But if you just see this drawing, which I was interested in, if you just see this drawing, what do you think it is? Do you see Picasso's signature? Do you see Do you think that he has anything to do with Stalin? Do you think that Stalin, yeah, whatever. I was interested in kind of imposing this very weird drawing on people and see, like, in a way that you would remember it, basically. That you would remember it. You remember a lot of other Picasso images, but this one, how could I sort of introduce it and force you to remember it? That was one of my questions.
Yeah, I was quite curious also asking you, this is what you showed also at the very beginning, that you're standing behind this portrait. So it's a woman and you have it, you play with it also in your collage, so that you're putting it away or you're hiding behind it. So this aspect was not addressed to you.
No, I think also that actually, maybe it's also so that our visual culture is very much done through words. So if you say, I think the Ukrainian, for instance, in New York, they were told that there's an image of Stalin on Cooper Union, and then that's what you see. Whereas I thought it was more an image of Picasso on Cooper Union, or by Picasso on Cooper Union. That was not communicated in the same way. And I think the word Stalin just also created much stronger reaction than I was prepared for, or I had sort of taken into consideration. The other, yeah, and then I think that I was actually a bit shocked that people so quickly just thought, we're not going to discuss it at all. I can understand that people are annoyed, I can understand that they thought it was a horrible project or whatever, but to not discuss it, I was a bit surprised that no one wanted to discuss it, no one wanted to actually address the Picasso part of it, which I think was more interesting than actually the Stalin part of that Picasso's what you call it, membership in the Communist Party and interest for a communist cause, and the fact that he also he gave a lot to the Communist Party also when in his will. This is kind of almost a contradiction, or it's not. It feels like a contradiction to the commercial success of Picasso, and I thought that was interesting to kind of include in, let's say, art history.
I have a comment here. Maybe this could be interesting because there were several comments. Most of them were really angry, so we can also approach them in the web still. There's a kind of documentation of it. And there was one by Miroslav Bitz who was saying, of course I have nothing but hate for Stalin, but just to play devil's advocate for a second, since it isn't a governmental decision or permanent at all, why exactly are we demanding it be taken down? Last I checked, there was something called freedom of speech in America, and it's one of the things that makes it strong. I question whether this doesn't share at least one element. Und so weiter, and with a very regime Stalin ruled, and what led to the censorship? Fear. And then he's addressing directly another person saying, Alex, it isn't just that Jews get outraged and pressure people to take things down, they also very shrewdly use those incidents constructively to educate and raise consciousness about the symbolism, the history, their story. So instead of losing that golden opportunity by destroying it and pushing the skeleton back into the closet, why aren't we trying to get a vocal group to peacefully protest outside it? How about a bunch of youths, of Ukrainians, surprise this artist at her little opening and ask those tough questions? And this is what I ask you. This would have been a good opportunity to really raise discourse, because what was not clear before, that this, I think, end of November is this Holodomor Remembrance Day of the day of the genocide from Stalin or to Ukrainian people. So this was something where people got really offended, but I think this could have been addressed. And why is it not a public knowledge? Because when the curators talked to you, they said, there's no problem, but they were not aware of maybe. So how did you perceive this whole aspect of the discourse on it?
I think that it was clearly so that they were not prepared for reactions, and then I do not know exactly what happened, that they because there were attempts to create discussions after the banners were taken down, not before as far as I know, and then Cooper Union did not really cooperate. there was no real interest for it. And then also I got really exhausted by the whole thing, so I sort of also said, okay, whatever. But I think that, yeah, I think the curator's role is very interesting in this, because I think that I could do, there's a certain kind of research, whatever that I do, and then there is a certain, I don't know, like, I don't know Cologne, I don't know what's going on there. There's like this thing that the curator would inform me, but the other thing is when there is a controversy, what do you do? Like, yeah, as you say, I think this opportunity to discuss something is really interesting, but of course it takes, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of, you have to think who is to be there, you have to take that someone is very angry, like someone here was really angry, even if it's, you know, and to handle all of these feelings. And I think also the Norwegian context that politicians, a lot of, that to handle public opinion is a huge thing. And to risk to lose kind of momentum of something, which I think was the fact case in that is, and I think that's much clearer to me now than it was then, actually, that this is a big thing. But I think it is, I mean, yeah, considering the Western liberties, the freedom of speech that we have and enjoy to a certain degree, these are also the limits. There are limits, and these are also important to be aware of and discuss to the degree that is possible.
Maybe we come back to your film, because we didn't talk about it, and I'm quite interested also in this aspect of the multi-layered. So you really researched in a very interesting way all the background around reception, and I think this is also what is an important aspect in the exhibition, the reception, not only reception of Picasso, but also reception of specific exhibitions, symbols, or also the drawing of Stalin. So, so you used the collage, and you also worked a lot with text, and you worked also a lot with different voices. I'm quite curious about, because this you built it in a very montage and aesthetic, and also with sounds and the international in different layers. How did you start to approach this material, and also did you think before, so my second question, before also of the banners as a third part of the project, that it could be also this kind of ation, or what is the difference between when we go in a film theater and see your film and we are in a public space? And because I was thinking of maybe if the people have seen opening sequences of the film, it would have been completely different. So I'm quite interested in these different contexts and in the way how you thought of creating this background, this context.
It is one of those. I don't know exactly what happened before the other thing, but I think that one of the reasons that the banners kept was that I think it's interesting when different groups or different audiences and different, so that the same project, for instance, one of the projects I did before this was like one publication, one film, and they would kind of travel in different, and meet different audiences, and I think the banner came about also as a kind of feeling that I wanted to confront or engage another audience than the one that would go to an art museum and be interested in Picasso also. That was one part. Exactly how I came to this banner, I cannot really explain, but the film itself, it was really, I thought, how can this was such a complicated, actually, story, so I thought how, I had this vision of a kind of children's book about something very complicated, like, so that you would just take for given a Cold War, you know, what is the Cold War? It's like, and very simple. At the same time, it is complicated, but to try to really, what do you say, like, make it as simple as possible was what I thought to begin with. Yeah, I think that's something.
But you made it as simple as possible, but in these different in contrasting, I think in contrasting, and also you have these intervals, not only the scenes, but things which are said or things which are not said. And I think what is really striking, we get these different, the same views of the from the one side and the other side of the curtain, because what you also researched, interestingly, that also in the West, Picasso was really mistrusted and seen as the, I don't know, but the expression was very harsh. So this is an interesting aspect, and also the reception that what kind of effect does this very incomplete drawing has, because from the reception history, it was not, it depends on the perspective, but I think it was regarded as not good for the, or not representative for kind of official portrait, because we know in long history of art history that there have been so many representative portraits. So I think also you told this with your last work, this history of the person who had Semyonovich, who had this postcard. So this is really a drastic thing. This aspect, how did you select your stories around, and where did you look? Because I think it's quite interesting. You created so much context. Not only official things which we can approach, but also small histories.
I think it was a very fun project to do in the sense that the elements were kind of so how little can I use was kind of and then to add on to that, that was one aspect. The other aspect was that I thought that it should be as accurate as possible. So I think the principle was that everything I quote or use as facts in the film, I at least had two sources, because of course it's like not the fact in the but that there are like more than one person or someone who has seen or said, so they put the quotes from the newspapers I actually saw and stuff like that. But then I think that so the book is, I have much more information or more material on both this the Western, like Winston Churchill's contempt towards modern art and Picasso in particular. There's also more about Picasso after this, his relationship to the Communist Party after the scandal. So in the film I kind of, I think I wanted it to be not too much, so that you could actually digest it in this half an hour. The last part with the Semyonovich story is, I mean, I have no idea if that happened, to put it that way. And I don't know if you believe it or not, I think some people do. And so, but the point was that I wanted it to be that for some people this, and this is true, that some people, there was enormous consequences of this drawing, and not for Picasso. I mean, Picasso's consequences were very small comparatively to some other people.
Yeah, but I think there we have in a good example of, we were talking beforehand, before our talk, about this aspect of fiction and documentary. And I think this, you were saying before, I'm interested in this reaction of people on images and how trustworthy images are, or if people trust them and don't look at the context, for example. So here they were looking at what they saw, but they didn't look at that it's an art project, for example. So I'm quite interested in, what do you think, this aspect of fiction and documentary, also in your, even if it was really well researched, but what kind of role does it play for you, and also in this context of the reception history?
Yeah, I think that this is a very complex relationship, I think, facts and fiction. I think that photographic mediums, and films included, in a sense, the film medium, they have introduced a belief in images that is unrealistic in one sense, so that actually there is a documentary tradition where you would think that everything you see is true in a kind of one-to-one relationship. some of this is kind of hard to put words on. But I think that what we speak less about is the relationship between the facts and how they are presented, or let's say different ways of creating fictions. So, and this I think is immensely interesting. It has to do with everything, basically politics and gender roles and normality versus all kinds of eccentricities. I think that storytelling in itself as a really wide area is very central in our culture, and more so, at the same time as things become more and more fragmented. I think that and there are many people here who knows more about this than me, but the genres that have been established through cinema, which are, for instance, documentary versus fiction, instead of maybe documentary versus staged, or so that this film is based on documentary material, which is really true, that I have also made things that are not based on a particular event. That is one difference. One of the differences in a documentary and what we call a stage film is the way of producing them. It's like a totally different way of working. But I think that in terms of the truth, it is not so sure that a film called documentary film is more true than a staged film. That is like a very, of course now language is like really hard to, but I really believe that we overrate documentary in terms of truth and underrate staged in terms, or constructed in terms of finding the truth, or saying something truthful.
I was thinking if maybe I should open the discussion. We could go on with a lot of questions, but I think for sure you have also questions or comments or remarks. You can also ask in German if you like.
I didn't actually want to basically ask something, but add something, as you were already staring at me with genres. In fact, if we go, what we are talking about today, or consider today as documentaries, is an invention of the 50s, and exactly the same mindset that basically, it's a Cold War invention. The idea of direct cinema being basically what you see, etc., etc. If we look at classical documentary cinema, this is a completely staged cinema. The documentary aspect is actually created by the way the viewer is addressed and the context in which the films are shown. If you look into the catalogs of the Venice Film Festival in the 30s, for example, you will see that you do have the difference between, yes, staged films, fiction films, but the non-fiction category is subcategorized in newsreel, which was the really real stuff, so to speak, but with no real artistic ambition, documentary, and then films about the art, which were actually considered a separate category. So I just wanted to follow up on your stare at me.
Yeah, I did stare at you, so thank you.
First of all, I would like to express my admiration for your wonderful film, because you succeeded in really presenting the different aspects of this more than ambiguous question. Fantastic. Secondly, I would like to know whether the book you prepared, if that's still available. Did you, I didn't really understand whether you prepared it before or after the film, and whether it's possible to get this book. Yeah.
The book is unfortunately only in a limited kind of edition. So I made like handmade books, so it's made out of the collages, and it was made totally parallel with the film. So the film is basically, you know, like almost like an illustrated book. You could say that it's a storyboard, and the book is the same. But so far it's only in a limited kind of artist edition.
Yeah, in libraries perhaps. Yeah.
Sorry?
In the library I might perhaps find
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much.
question was, where can you get information about this case as well?
Or where can I have a look at the book?
Yeah.
Of course I can't, of course, send film, but that's the book.
Yeah. But when you did your research in 2000, maybe 6 or 5, I don't know how many years you researched, where you getting your sources? Because some of the books that I think of, you know, after researching for these cases, they were published later. So where did you do research?
Actually, let me see. The project I did before this called Gentlemen and Assholes was about the CIA and the Cold War, so I had a lot of material, like surrounding material from that. And then I think I bought, you know, all this kind of like Moustache. I read a lot of this kind of surrounding, not really political, like so her account of this day and this thing. But and then I think in French, I mean in France it's much more known that he was a communist. So I also shown the film once at a seminar in Paris about sort of Picasso seminar. And that was very interesting because in France they knew much more about the story than anywhere else actually than I showed it. So I think I read, and then, yeah, I think that was it. There wasn't so much. Really, it was like, I think I could sort of list the books I read. And newspaper articles, some magazines.
Yeah, because there wasn't so much unless you went to the Picasso archives and...
I did not
yeah.
have it. And also I did never, I tried to get the rights to use the drawing. I never, I found out who had the rights because it was the Lettres. I don't remember exactly, but I never got an answer. And that was actually until the last moment there was with the question if I could print it or not. Or like, but I took the chance and I never heard from the Picassos Stalin, so I hope I won't hear from them now.
We told them.
But you had this, because you were addressing now the gentlemen and assholes, but you had also the man in the background, so the film, and so you knew, or in your works before, it's always that you have an interest in things or aspects which are overlooked, and I really liked how you, so that you thought directly that you would do it on the drawing of Picasso. Was it directly clear, or was it?
No, actually, when I did The Man in the Background, I read a lot about the Cultural Cold War, what was published by then, which was like 2005 or something. But then when I saw this drawing, I actually made a photocopy of it. That was back in the days before smartphones and stuff, and I hang it on the wall of my studio. I had a fellowship at Akademie Solitude in Stuttgart, outside of Stuttgart. And then what was so funny with that drawing was that when people came to my studio, the people from the East would react very different from the people from the West. So that was actually just a kind of observation. And then I was totally broke after I came back from Solitude. And I read, you know, there's a book in Norway with all the foundations you can apply to. This is really funny, I forgot this, sorry. And there's one foundation for spreading knowledge about Picasso in Norway. I called the guy and I said, listen, I have this drawing, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Can I apply for money? Yeah, give it a try, he said. And I got 3,000 euros or something. And then 2 years later, he called me and said, listen, what happened? And then I was like, I don't know, and then I started the project.
And I was wondering, the Foundation for the Freedom of Speech in Norway, who also that also funded the film. What kind of a foundation is that, and how did they react to the party?
It's become very important. At this point, they had not been around for so long. It's a private foundation, and they basically, in terms of it, they're kind of a complement to the state financed art, and they supported the project all the way. Actually, even the director went when it was attacked in the media in Norway. He defended it. So they were, and I received money for my new project also from them. So that's one point. They are very important.
I just had a question. Interestingly, just had a thing, an aspect in mind you were mentioning before. You address also what is quite central in your exhibition, this aspect, or this different perspectives, the West and the East, and also similar ones on abstract art, and really like dismissing abstract art or formalism, which was a real debate in the time, as not being able to represent or a glorious country. So how was it that you read a lot about it? Or was it an aspect, a kind of footnote you had? Or was it also that you were interested in this irony of the different perspectives? Yeah, how did you came across this specific aspect? Because I think you highlighted, and it's what it's also, the exhibition is also showing or reflecting.
I think it's interesting. We spoke before the presentation today about this. If art, I mean, instrumentalization is one word that is used about art. I mean, in the way that the arguments against Picasso's drawing was, for me, they were like, as I said, almost echoes of things I would hear from television or film funding in terms of how to describe something that is out. You cannot use it. The public will not want this. It's very similar kind of words, and also the arrogance of the artist is very strong, like this aggression towards this person who just does what he wants or whatever. That I thought was interesting, and that's why I also probably have so many of those arguments, that I think they actually resembles a general feeling where art or intellectual thinking or whatever is seen as the direct opposite of people or the interest of the people. That's one aspect. But I think also it's interesting, this dynamic between the fact that if art is only for art, or if art is in a context and is used for something. I mean, Stano or whatever, he was also possibly right about the fact that this creates crackpots and crazy, we want inspiration to go to war, to make kids, whatever. So all these things are, I think, complex. I think for me the important thing is that I think freedom of expression in general is a very difficult thing to handle for any society, and also for ours. And I think we underestimate how difficult it is to actually say what we mean, not to speak about, I'm free to say whatever, but like this, for instance, to just take the one very concrete example, the Labour politician who stopped this banner. I think the problem is that why can't he tell me why these banners can't be there? That would have been an interesting, but he just says no. That, I think, shows that it's not freedom of expression, in the sense that he cannot say what he actually is worried about. He has to handle opinions, but he can't just say, listen, I do not want to be associated with Stalin. That's what he did. I think that's what he didn't want to. But he couldn't say that. He had to say that there was something wrong with me, or whatever.
Yeah, this is what this member of the Ukrainian group
exactly.
said. It's fear. And but you were wondering about what would have been the difference, because before you were talking about ambiguity, and what is the problem? Is it ambiguity in space? What would have been the difference if there would have been maybe a title of your work? Stalin by Picasso, or Woman with Moustache, and your name on it would have been a difference in this public space.
At that point, actually, I did not. I was very clear that I did not want that, because I wanted this to be like that people should just pass this and think, what is this? What is this? And these two guys, is this Picasso or is this? I wanted this kind of confusion. When I look at it now, I think it would be. I think also it's like, for me, it's absurd to put my name on that drawing, or it's like it's also. And when I was doing this film, my colleagues, I got this. Are you doing a film about Picasso? This is like so weird, It's like no art. It's like none of my friends or colleagues thought that was a really good idea. There's something very awkward about making a film about Picasso as a woman, and so I think that also It's interesting. What would that look like? Like my name on top of that, or a woman with the I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't have solved anything, but...
No, but it would, I think it would have solved something, because then it would have been kind of a clear sender of a message, or this is an exhibition you should see, or something.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question.
And for once, actually a question. At what point did the name Stalin, so to speak, appear with regards to this building as well as Cooper Union? Because, let's face it, do you really think most people would have recognized that this is Stalin? Because he is so far from any general idea of basically we have about what Stalin looks like. Aragon was actually quite smart with his original idea, and the whole shit would never have hit the fan if Aragon would have gone through with his early idea, Eternal Youth of Stalin, and nothing would have happened. And so basically, I guess if one just shows this, how many people would really recognize Stalin? How many people would recognize Picasso? I mean, he has hair. Picasso does not have hair, so to speak, you know what I mean. Where's the pipe? Stalin has a pipe. I mean, this is the iconography. So these are highly un-iconographic images. So the question is, who recognizes it?
No, it's a good way. I'm absolutely sure that the title didn't help. But then I also think that you reminded me now also that the reason I wanted the two photographs on the side was that I also wanted these two icons to be mixed, like like really that this does not, you know, in my, I'm often interested in something that contradicts what I thought before. I was surprised that Picasso had made this drawing, and I thought these two young men, okay, they're both short, they're great, you know, whatever. And I thought that was an interesting term of, public image, as you say. It was not the most famous photos of them either, they're both quite young. I thought that this was also interesting, so that it would be kind of less, I don't know, it would contradict an established image of both of them. I also have to say that once I have been attacked for this in the West, for the opposite reason. So there was a communist, an American communist, who thought that everything the Ukrainians said in New York, they're all fascist and blah, blah, blah. They're always kind of, I think this discussion is like endless somehow. You can always find someone who would see it as only a propaganda image somehow.
Maybe an interesting detail you were telling also in your text on this, on the film and on this whole debate, that you went as many years ago you went to, I don't know if it was still Stalingrad or no, it was still Petersburg or it was Leningrad, not Stalingrad, sorry. Leningrad, you went there and you were very, very surprised by all these propaganda images in public space. And I think this was also a starting point maybe for you.
I think
thinking
probably,
about a kind of public.
Absolutely, that probably came, without me knowing it, that was in the background. I don't know if anyone of you have been to the Soviet Union in the back, but when I was there, it was like this. I mean, really, these facade banners. So I think somehow this has influenced the idea, and that the image of someone, like it wasn't like a general image on the facade. It was always like someone you should kind of idolize, like Marx or. They didn't have Stalin when I was there, but they had other men on the facade. So that's probably, and for me at that point it was that when I came back to Oslo, to the Western democracy that I grew up in, I started to look at the images in the public space I lived in differently, because of course we did not have at all like personal idolization of the king or the prime minister or something, but we had other kinds of ideal images around us, and I thought, for me, that was probably a very important moment or kind of realization that, wow, here there's someone sending me messages everywhere too, and they are just a little bit different. The language is different, and the message is a bit different. That how to reach happiness or is different, but it is somehow also a kind of a utopia at the end of the image as a goal.
Okay. If there are no further questions, then thank you very much, Lene. Thank you very much to the audience. Thank you.